Welcome to a new episode of the AEC podcast by Excelize. Today, we explore the intersection of innovation, collaboration, and transformation across the AEC world, architecture, engineering, construction. I'm your host, Sonali, and we have a very special guest today. He's reshaping how we think about large scale construction through the lens of lean thinking. Joining me today is Do, leading advocate of lean construction, integrated project delivery, and target value design. He's worked on some of the world's most complex and capital intensive giga projects. He brings a deeply practical yet visionary approach to project delivery. In this episode, we are digging into the real world value of lean, where it struggles and how it's evolving in this age. And whether you're a builder, a designer, a client, or a project manager, this conversation is going to shift your perspective. So, before we get into what is lean and everything else, I have one question for you: Is have you visited India? Since we're doing this out of India, that's my first question to you.
Have I visited India?
Yeah.
No, I have not.
Well, so when is that visit happening?
Maybe this year, maybe next year. The last couple of years have been really focused on the United States
Okay.
and Canada. But now that things are taking place all over the world, it would make sense to come visit more countries because right now we're seeing lean being more adopted in Asia, like Southeast Asia. You look at Japan, Singapore, Indonesia. So there's a lot more places to talk about these things. Uh, 10, 20 years ago, it was just a United States thing. So that when you go to other countries, there wasn't much projects to visit, much people to talk about. But now you look at Europe, they're renovating cathedrals. They're doing all the ancient work, where you're fixing like the major cathedrals in Spain. They're using last planner system. So there is lean being adopted pretty much in every country, and for all types of projects, and for various levels of sophistication. Because
Okay.
what I would say is that a lot of the ideas that we've already formulated in the last 20 plus years, they're not fully adopted in most countries. In general, we have last planner system, 5S, visual management. Those are the starting point. But this level of sophistication is pretty low. But people are interested, so there is going to be within the next 5 years. I can't see how they'll go from where they are right now to getting the full system, because lean adoption is more about how interested you are about doing it. There's nothing stopping you from getting to high lean maturity within a few years.
Mm. So, you've been working on a lot of big projects and a big advocate of lean. Um, what was your first exposure to lean? How did you first learn about this?
So I started learning lean in general before lean construction in 2010. So I was a visiting researcher at Tohoku University, which is a Japanese university in Sendai. So I spent a year there doing research, but we were visiting all the Japanese businesses. We're visiting the cultural centers, visiting the Nissan manufacturing plants. So I was able to see kind of the Japanese way of doing business. That's strange.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
I'll continue with that last question, right?
Yeah.
So my first exposure to lean itself started in 2010. So I was a visiting student, kind of a exchange student at Tohoku University. This is a Japanese university in Sendai. And in the year, we were looking at the different businesses. We were going on field trips to look at how Japanese were, working in their society and culture. And we've seen some of the, Japanese crafts. We saw Nissan manufacturing plants, amongst other things. So that's my first exposure to like Japanese and lean, right?
Okay.
And 2000 later in 2010, I started my master's program at UC Berkeley, and I worked with Professor Glenn Ballard, who was the founder of Lean Construction. So from Berkeley, I started doing research with Glenn on target value design. So we were looking at five major projects in California that range from 100 million to 1.5 billion dollars. And back then, in 2010 timeline, a $1.5 billion project is a very big project. It's one of the biggest projects ever. Today, that's not very impressive because that's a common project, right? But back then, it was not $100 million was a big project, and 1.5 billion is a major project. So we were doing the early studies on target value design, IPD, because these were the first true IFOA projects in the United States. So the owners, general contractors, and trades, as well as designers, all banded together to create a target value design research group. I believe it was like 10 or 12 companies came together. And the idea was that because these ideas were so new, they weren't sure if they were going to work, how it was going to work. So they needed somebody to go to the project and empirically collect data. So I was just the person who went to all these projects, collected data, presented to Glenn, asked Glenn kind of how he interprets the data. And through that process, we were able to discover that TBD projects were on average 10 to 15% lower than the market costs while having higher safety, higher productivity, higher satisfaction. So the owners were getting the products that they wanted, and the teams were making a good profit. The One of the questions we asked after the research study was, why aren't more people trying to do this if the results are so good? And the answer was, they weren't aware that this was happening. So we were realizing that in the 2010 to 2015 timeframe, there wasn't a lot of ways to learn about lean construction. You would accidentally learn about lean at you would accidentally learn about lean at a conference that you attend, and you would accidentally learn about lean via bumping into somebody that you know, right? So there wasn't a lot of ways to learn about lean. If you search lean construction online, you weren't finding much information. And what we found out is that also the research ideas about lean construction were all in academic papers because that's actually where it originated, right? It originated with Glenn and Greg and Laura Cascella publishing IGLC papers, lean construction journals, and in various academic papers. But the average practitioner weren't accessing those or reading those because on a project, you ask them to read a research paper, they'll say, "No, I'm too busy. I had to do work." So there isn't much reading about research papers. So that's kind of why we started the Lean Construction blog. We said that if people that know about these ideas would use them, but they just don't know about the ideas, maybe we can bridge that and create a simpler format to where people who are practicing lean write about what they're doing and their ideas, and then people who are interested in lean can read those ideas and use them. So we wanted to create a blog in a way to make sure that we're showcasing authentically the things that are happening on projects. Because what I find out is that most publications and most things that people talk about how to improve the industry doesn't actually start with a person going to the job site. And because if you don't go to a job site, there will be assumptions in your ideas. There will be logical errors in what you're thinking that you may not be aware of. So a lot of people have really good ideas about how to improve projects, and they believe that their ideas is the solution, and they generally believe that, right? Nobody's advocating for what they don't believe in. But the question is,
Sorry.
how often do they go to the project? And unless they go and look at the work and observe the work first, and then build empirical, experimental ideas that are replicable, it's very hard for us to take the ideas and then use it on multiple projects. So that's kind of what we started with, is like looking at the work, looking at the projects, and I always advocate people to look at the work more because many times the answers that you're looking for are much simpler than you think they are.
Hmm. So I think this kind of leads into my question is lean is very often misunderstood. And what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding people have about lean?
Okay, so there's lots of misunderstanding. I think the first one I would say is that people believe that lean is the last planner system. So they believe that if I'm applying the last planner system, I'm applying lean. So that's the first one. Second one is executives believe that lean is something that the field or the superintendents work on. Last planner is only for superintendents because last planner is the person who plans before the work is done. So me as an executive, I don't have to do any work on last planner system. That's for my field crew, right? So they're not engaging or learning how they participate, learning how they can spread it, learning how they can encourage it amongst their team members. They just think that it's a responsibility of the superintendent or the foremen or the project managers. So those are the two common misconceptions. Is that one is that it is this last planner system, and two is as somebody who's the director level or above, they don't need to participate.
Hmm.
And those are actually a recipe for failure because number one is that you get some value from last planner system, but it's not the entire system. There's more lean methods. And also with lean construction, it's not just simply last planner system because you have the lean philosophy, the principles, the methods, and the tools. So one of the ways that we try to demystify the misconceptions is actually I have a free ebook called The Art and Philosophy of Lean Construction. When you search it up on Google, you should
Okay.
be able to find it. And it's only 80 pages, it's not very long, but it does talk about the history. It talks about the methods, it talks about the tools, it talks about examples, but also the goal there is to explain with a philosophical foundation what lean construction is. Because if you ask 20 people what lean construction is, you'll actually get 20 different answers, and that is not very helpful. One of the most misunderstood things I've ever seen. To where literally you ask 20 people and you get 20 different answers.
Yeah. So I mean, I've had similar examples where people ask you, can you quantify the benefit? So,
Hmm.
if you had to quantify the benefit, do you think you can share any example where you've been able to save something in terms of the big projects that you're working on, not just a monetary, but other benefits?
Yeah, I mean we have the data because again, if you can't prove with data, that means that you don't actually have anything that's replicable. And if you can't prove that your practice is better than the average, then no, why would someone trust you and believe and try it, right? So I'll give you some examples. Do you see my screen right here?
Yes, I do.
So again, what I would say is that your results will vary if you try to apply lean and TVD, right? But these are two examples from two different time frames. The first one is Sutter House Castro Valley. This is a $350 million IPD project in 2009. And from the beginning to end, remember, with target value design, we're tracking costs every single month. So they were able to reduce the cost by 15% from beginning to end through the TVD process. The one on the right is actually a current project at UCSF BREP. And on this project, the team started out at $761 million before they started doing the TBD process. And after 2 years, which is 24 months, and these are all cost updates monthly. And the last one was in August 2024, so this is fairly new. They were down to 643, and this is an 18% reduction, so about $112 million of savings using TBD. So we have examples of cost savings, schedule savings, safety records. So the data is there. This is kind of why I always tell people we start with the data first, because if I'm trying to tell you a tale about something that's better and you have never experienced it or never seen it, there is almost no chance that you will listen to me. and there's no chance that you'll see it. So this is kind of what I do for the Indians Institute, is that I show empirical. As you can see, pretty much everything that we're showing here is from actual, projects, right? So we try to explain what lean is, and the way that we do it slightly different, as I told you before, is that
Yeah.
there's always a there's always a cycle between theoretical thinking and empirical application. And a lot of people start teaching the theoretical thinking that says, oh, this is what I think would work. Please test it out. And what I found out is that very few people will take the risk to do that. What we found out works better is that we've already done the work from the theory to the empirical. So now, if I want to teach somebody something, I start with the data from the empirical back to the theoretical, because then I have pictures, artifacts, examples of projects, and I explain kind of how it worked. And by having lots of examples, so we actually go out there and go out there to projects, use photos, videos, collect examples, do storytelling, and by doing so, we demystify these things. But again, if the examples are good, you can find the examples, right?
Yeah.
I don't. If you want me to copy something or replicate something, you gotta tell me what you want me to replicate. And you can't tell me what to replicate. I don't know what to do, right? And if we take the examples and we can actually show them, kind of backwards engineer why it works, how it works, what are the key things you had to do for it to actually work, then people have a very strong understanding about how they can do it, right? But in terms of lean, like one of the things that I teach people is that we have to break it down to the philosophy, the principles, the methods, and the tools. Otherwise, it's too complex. You have 50, 60 new words, all these new concepts, and it's like alphabet soup. You have no way of putting it together. So really what I teach people is that we first start with the lean philosophies, and this is universal amongst all lean, whether it's lean manufacturing, lean construction, lean other fields. The three principles are respect for people, maximizing value while minimizing waste, and continuous improvement. These are foundational ideas that never change. Our goal with lean is to make these ideas practical and a reality on projects. So these are the ideas that we strive for, but we have to figure out how to make this so that we can actually achieve all three of the philosophies. From the philosophies, I share with people some principles. So these are just some 10 principles that we have. Principles are generally ideas and wisdom that we uncover through practice that lead to better project outcomes. So separate waste from value, promote flow, minimize work in process, reduce cycle time, increase transparency, visualize information, go to where the work takes place, share imperfect information, plan collaboratively, prioritize learning. A lot of these ideas may be aligned with what people are thinking, but some of them may be counterintuitive to what people are thinking. So we educate them on the principles that generally lead to better outcomes. And from the principles, over the last 3 decades, we have developed these 9 lean methods that are very specific for construction, with construction examples. So you have last planner system, target value delivery, choosing by advantages, set-based design, reliable promises, TAC, Scrum, visual management, project production management. So the idea is that we're applying these methods on projects, and to do so, we're looking at tools, right? So we have the option of being digital, analog, or hybrid. And a lot of times these days, we're using more technology. So what we say is, how do we make sure the technology aligns with lean? And these are the 5 criteria I ask people to look into. Does it improve information flow? Does it promote transparency? Does it enable collaboration? Does it help us reduce waste? And does it empower people to create more value? If the answer is yes, definitely use it because it aligns with the lean philosophy. So those are the ideas, and we try to create the pyramid. So on most projects, we say, hey, can you take your project and map out what you're actually doing and not doing, and figure out areas for improvement and things that you can work on. And obviously, as we do this, we show them what success looks like, which is a reduction in cost over time. We show them how to do it, which includes early onboarding, collaborative contracts, big rooms, continuous cost estimating, BIM and VDC. So most of the time, what I like to tell people is that, let's go back here. Most of your customers actually care about time more than cost these days because the customers that operate the asset, anyone that builds anything over $1 billion is building it to generate revenue.
Yeah.
Whether it's a hospital, a hotel, an airport, nuclear, data center, they want to get the project done faster.
Okay.
The longest way for you to build a project is to traditional design bid build. So if you want this, you probably take the longest. That's what you're gonna do. If you want it to take shorter, because you're collaborating, you're condensing some of the phases in the beginning, you're gonna be looking at IPD or progressive design build, because these are strategies in order to reduce costs and time. And the reason why we're reducing time is because the revenue generated in that 1 year or 6 months done ahead of time is worth a lot more to the owners than any dollar you can save for the project. So we had to ask the owner, if you want us to, do you want us to build the cheapest first cost of your project, or do you want us to optimize for your business model? And if you ask this question, a non-developer, so a developer builds a project to sell it. So they only care about costs because they're trying to look at interest rates and looking at a way to make profit. But you have somebody who's operating the facility, building it to operate, they're gonna say the only reason why I build is to align it with my business model.
Yeah.
And then you ask them, what is your business model? They'll tell you. And then now you know kind of what they're trying to do. And also what I would say is that oftentimes the customer tells us that they want to build a data center, and we try to figure out how to build a data center, right? But we don't ask enough questions about, okay, if we build this data center in 3 years, in 2 years, in 1 year, what, and these are the cost and schedule scenarios that we have for these three options. Which one do you prefer as a customer? We don't ask the customer what they prefer. We just assume that um, they want us to optimize for the lowest first cost. And that is an assumption that's not correct.
Yeah, so I think for any project, even if it is a developer, the monetization is really important, and the
Mm-hmm.
time cost is another factor. And then what you just mentioned about you starting by explaining the philosophy of why you're doing this. So, if we have to look at what kind of leadership do we need, or what kind of people do we need if we want to implement, what would be your take on this?
So leadership is really important because if you don't have leadership, the right leadership that supports this, that invests in this, or develop people, right, you're not gonna, nothing's gonna happen. So a lot of the failures of lean deployment is actually leadership, not because lean doesn't work. Um, what I found out with leadership is that most of them are unaware about lean because they were educated 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? And the world has changed in the last 20, 30, 40 years by a lot. So if you went to, no matter what university you went to IIT, and you were there 20 years ago, I guarantee that today the world is different than when you were there, right? So with leadership, we have to remind them that yes, the world has changed, but that's a good thing because you now have newer ideas that can work for you. So with leadership, what I really recommend for them is first, don't believe that lean works. You take an executive education program that's a short few weeks just to learn the key ideas. And then also, if you think this is important, go visit a project and see for yourself, and then talk to other leaders. And what you'll find out is that leadership is needed for these projects because collaboration intensifies decision making and timelines, and it forces leadership to make timely decisions. Otherwise, the project is going to stall. So, therefore, as the projects become bigger and more collaborative, You need leaders that are actually actively at the project. If you have a bunch of small projects, like 50, 100 small projects in the $50 million range, leadership is in the office dealing with all the problems that happen that the project teams can't solve. But if your project is $5 billion or $10 billion, leadership has to be at the project because your project risk is the risk of your company, right? So
Yeah.
you're not gonna be a leader going to your office. You have to be a leader going to your major projects. And what we find out is that even at these $3-4 billion projects in California, some of the leadership never shows up to the project, never asks what they're doing, never like it. To me, it's kind of crazy that you are turning over the rest of your entire company to people who are middle management and newer, and you as senior management don't go to the project to even ask or be curious or to know what's going on. And it could be several years before bad things happen, and by the time things happen, it's really hard to fix them. So leadership to me is very important, very crucial. I would start with first with executive education. Various people do that. Um, and then secondly, I would do a job visit on a major project. So those are the two things that I think is a starting conversation. And as the project is running, there are people that do leadership development, and I think that leadership development is really really important because most people are not educated or trained to be leaders. They're trained to be doers, and then they're promoted to be leaders. And there's a disconnect between what you know how to do and what you're asked to do now.
Mm. So it's not necessarily a top-down or a bottom-down approach. It is a combination of what your goals are and working towards it.
Yes, it's a it's a logical problem, right? So your question is that, but you got to ground it on the actual project delivery. So whether you're a superintendent or project management learning this, you still have to see an example for yourself.
Mm. So now, has there been any example that you could share where you've the best of intentions and things fail, where you've done everything possible in a best case effort, but lean is not worked?
No, I've never seen that before
Oh, that's rare.
because we're breaking that. Lean is not just one method or one idea, right? There's like 50 to 60 little ideas that you're doing there, right? So if you're putting in these key ideas, there's no reason for you to fail. Because
Okay.
you think about it, lean, right? It's just some basic stuff, right? Let
Yeah.
me try to pull something for you to explain to you. Okay, so give me one second. Let me put this up to a diagram to explain to you. And then, obviously I'll show it to you and I'll ask you the question, like, if you see this happening, would you think it's going to fail? Okay, so let's go to, so around the world, people think lean is just one thing. What I'm saying is that it's a series of little things that we do, like big rooms. Um, and really the key about lean is this: we want to create one project, one price, one plan, one team, because we want to optimize for the entire whole project. And that's even just starting with optimizing for the whole project is actually harder than it sounds, because you have to have one price and one plan and one team. Those are actually quite hard because you got to invest in a space for the team to work together. Most owners do not even invest in the big rooms for teams to work together.
Hmm.
Most teams do not have one plan. Everybody has their own plans. Every team has their own plan. Most teams do not know what the true cost of the project is. They only know the cost of their contracts. They know
Okay.
their contract size, but they don't know the cost of the project, right? So again, so imagine this: you're on a project and you plan visually inside the office, and you keep that plan outside in the field. Like, how can this lead to failure? It's very hard for you to communicate what you're trying to do with each other, and that leads to failure. It's very hard for you to take the project and break into zones and work together, and that leads to failure. It's kind of very hard for you to have the entire project schedule on the wall, and you can see it all from phases over several years, and it leads to failure. What it'll lead to is that you'll have conversations about, is this the best way of doing things? Can we improve the duration? In this sequence, is this how we want to organize our work, right? So what I'm saying is that you make the information out there. Like if you go to the project and you prioritize visuals, where in the office you have visuals for what your key performance indicators are and what's happening. in the field, you're removing waste and organizing it. So you're keeping as little things in the field as you need. Like, can this lead to failure? So a lot of these times, or what about when you start to looking at studying the way you're doing work? You say, can we videotape some of the work that we're doing, and can we figure out which part of the work is valuable and which one is wasteful? And just limiting, we're gonna videotape it, right? And even if we don't even eliminate the waste, we have a conversation about what we're actually doing, and we might find out that, oh, this person staying out here is not safe. Maybe we should change that working process to make it safer. Well, that really can't lead to problems. So a lot of times, what I say is that right now, when you go to construction jobs, it all looks like the top. Regardless of what country you're in. This is the United States, but I'm saying that India, Nepal, any country, it looks like the top. Well, it feels like you're going to war, and they don't invest any money on the office or the workers, and they expect them to build a high quality product, which makes no sense psychologically, right? If you want to build a high quality product, you have to build the project in a way that people want to go to work. So the pictures in below is actually an IPD project where they're investing in nice furniture, um, collaborative space, collaborative environments for you to do work. On most projects, because they don't know how to improve cost or efficiency, they just go with the cheapest bathrooms, lowest tech, not fully coordinated models, siloed trailers, cheapest tables and chairs. This is the optimization that we see people do today. And even as the project size becomes billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, where the project size is larger than most companies' annual revenue, they don't invest in it as if they're running a multi-billion-dollar company. They're investing it like they're running a Walmart or like a low price, office, right? So what we're saying is that, hey, if we can show that you do these things like humane bathrooms, good models, construction technology, co-location, robotics, innovation, industrialized construction. If we can show that holistically that these things lead to better outcomes, will you do it? The answer is yes. The only problem is that nobody has been able to show holistically that these things work because nobody has tried to like put them all together and look at the project holistically, right? So a lot of times, I look at projects and I say that, okay, lean isn't one thing. There is a series of levels of capability and sophistication from the left to the right. So if you're brand new to Lean, you may start with Last Planner System, 5S, Visual Management, Scrum, and then you move on to TAC, Waste Walks, and then you transition towards IPD, Progressive Design Build, Big Rooms, and then you do Target Value Design, Choosing by Advantages, Set-Based Design. So it's not just one thing. And it only fails if you don't know which one you're using at which time. I mean, if somebody's asking for ice cream and you're giving them pasta, it's gonna fail.
Yeah.
Because you're not giving them what they want. If they're saying that, oh, by the way, we have chaotic things on site, we need to improve our, productivity, and you're removing constraints, you're doing look aheads, you're planning collaboratively, then you're solving their problems. If you solve someone's problems immediately in the right order with the right methods and tools, then how can you fail? The only way that you can fail is that maybe you don't know what you're doing, or maybe you're misapplying the ideas, or maybe you're trying to ask the team to do something that isn't really the right solution for them at that moment. If somebody is choking and they're dying of no oxygen and you're asking them to take the vitamins, they're not going to take the vitamins. They're going to say, hey, I'm dying right here. Make sure I don't die first. And then we'll take care of the vitamins and nutrition later, because that's a good idea, but that's not what I need today.
So, while there is different levels of sophistication that you can bring in, and you also mentioned earlier that there's no like one size fits all. You have to see what the situation and then implement these practices. So, at one end, we are talking about customized approach, and then at one end we are saying AI is trying to disrupt everything. How do you see AI affecting lean, or it won't, or it will improve?
Well, AI is going to disrupt everything. That's true, to a certain extent, right? But AI can help you manage your information better, help you communicate, help you summarize, create transparency in your meeting notes to know what's going on in your projects. AI can create custom workflows for your RFIs, submittals, and the repetitive tasks that you do on a daily basis. But AI isn't going to take a hammer out there and install the building. So I would say AI will disrupt half of construction, the half that we still have to go out there and build. That's not going to go away anytime soon. AI is not going to. There's no AI software that can you tell it what you want to where you want to pour concrete and it'll pour for you, and it'll install rebar for you, and it'll install windows for you, right? But AI can help you with procurement, purchasing, looking at your procurement logs, looking at your long lead time items. So there is a lot of use cases for AI, and construction definitely can use it because at the project level, there's so many things that people have to do to keep the project running that AI is has a big use case, one of the most use cases in all industries.
Hmm.
But AI alone is not going to pour your concrete. It's not going to improve the quality of your actual construction. So there still is a need to use lean methods and use logic and use the things that we know how to do in addition to AI, and then you'll get a very killer project.
Okay. So if somebody wants to adopt any of the lean principles, what would be the one thing that they need to start with, or it's a holistic thing? You cannot do one.
Well, I would say that these are different ways of deploying lean, right? Once you say, "Oh, I want to deploy lean," these are all the options. So I listed all of them here. So the first one is DIY. You can learn for yourself, which is perfectly fine. Lean Construction blog has 600 articles, a bunch of content, webinars, podcasts. You can study there, right? If you as you move up, you can do training. So you can hire someone to do group coaching workshops. You can have someone do a guided implementation by the hour, by the day, and this will cover 99% of the projects. So Last Planner System, 5S, TAC, Scrum, you can deploy for this model. If you're trying to do something really sophisticated, you have a multi-billion-dollar project, I don't think you're going to be able to DIY or group coach that. You're going to actually have to hire a team that knows how to do it. So in that model, it's called results as a service. So they'll be charging you some percentage or some hourly rate for them to apply the very complicated methods. But these are all viable options for learning lean. And what I would say is that if you don't know where you're starting, start by educating yourself first and start with a DIY version because there's no need to spend money until you see value.
Okay. Just a couple more questions, I think maybe the last one. There's a lot of discussion on in the world right now on what's happening, the whole geopolitical situation. So, do you think the impact of the economy? I mean, what would be the impact of the economy on implementing lean practices? Would that help projects, or it's not going to help projects?
Yes, sure. Let me try to explain this by getting to. So the world is moving towards more collaborative contracts, right? So geopolitically, what are we looking at right now? We're looking at inflation and tariffs.
Yeah.
Those things, and also supply chain, because the tariffs, just like COVID, right? The tariffs are affecting supply chain. So some of the manufacturers of HVAC products in the United States, they make their products in Mexico or Canada, right? And because they don't know what the final tariffs are, they don't have any more stock because they're waiting to figure out what is the actual final tariff and see how to price things, right? So what we're seeing this is that in a world that's changing with tariffs, inflation, where if you ask somebody to predict inflation for the last 5 years, their answers would have been completely wrong. Nobody would have been able to predict inflation from 2020 to 2025. Impossible, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a $1 billion project and you did design bid build, guess what? You contractor, you're liable for all your costs.
Yeah.
5 years later. So the worst way of being in business is to design bid build, because you're taking all the risk yourself without enough profit to cover that risk. You would rather do collaborative contracts like IPD or progressive design build, because why? The owner is involved, and you have provisions to where the owners are taking that tariff risk, that inflation risk, right? Separate from the cost of the materials, cost of work. Because as your project becomes in a multi-billion dollar plus, would you want to take the risk of that? And how many, you know, even if you're off by 10%, you have a 10% cost overrun, $100 million. How many general contractors can absorb that?
Mm.
Very few. So would you want to absorb that? And the answer probably is no. What general contractor will want to take that risk of signing themselves up for 5 years of inflation projection? A typical project, large project, is 5, 10 years. So who wants to take 5, 10 years of inflation, tariffs, and all that uncertainty, when it would make more sense to be collaborative and work with the owners? And also with an owner, if your contractor is losing money, they're not going to work very hard. So as soon as your contractor is losing money, your project is no longer a priority. Staying in business is a priority. So it's very relevant to today, because as the project size becomes, you know, 1 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion, 50 billion, right? These are all project sizes that are somewhat normal today. So would you want to take a $5 billion risk and be off by 5% or 10%?
No.
And the company survive that?
So, if there was one thing that you would want to tell anybody um, who is on the fence in terms of adopting anything related to lean, what would be that one thing?
So I would say that skepticism for new ideas is a good thing. That means you're thinking. You don't want to be the guy who just tries every new trend, right?
Okay.
So the only way for you to logically go through this would be to visit a project site, talk to teams, see examples for yourself with your eyes and ears. Go to the project and see it for yourself. We don't want to convince somebody who hasn't done their research, because they would not be adequately prepared to do these things. So at a minimum, see a project. And always, to me, always, you want to improve the industry, see more projects. Do a more of a project based mentality. A lot of people talk about industry and they never go to the job site. And that's okay. That's okay to a certain extent. But as you can see, there's only so much you can do and understand unless you actually see it for yourself. So my advice to people is, if you're on the fence about lean, you should visit a project. In the United States, we have projects here all the time. Every month, we have a new group. Could be Indonesian government, Singaporean government, Japanese, um, Finland, people from other countries, Germany. They come here, Australia, New Zealand. They come here. They have 10, 20 people, and we work with the teams here to let them see 1 or 2 projects. So during that trip, they can actually see it. And because they can see these things in action and see all the stuff that I show you are from actual projects, right? So they'll see it in action. They'll see the diagrams. They'll see the people. Those. So this is kind of what we recommend, right? We recommend that the best way to learn lean is to do executive education. Executive education is good because you'd have to have the vocabulary to understand what these 50 or 60 ideas are, so that you can actually coherently understand what you're looking for. But you still have to see a project, because unless you actually see it for yourself and actually go there and say, okay, This is what they say in the big room. This is the schedule. This is how they're working together. Let's go to the job site. Does the schedule here match the job site? And these are just some very basic ideas, but I can't think of how you would learn these things without going and visiting an actual project and talking to real people. And I don't think you should risk your business and livelihood without doing your due diligence either. It doesn't make sense to risk your entire business, try something experimental. But what I'm saying is that lean is not experimental. We've been around 30 years. We have the data, we have the empirical evidence, and we have the projects to prove it. So we're not asking anybody to do anything experimental. We're asking somebody to do something that has already been proven to work.
Well, thank you. I think I've definitely got a new perspective on lean, and it's really something. Maybe I take up the executive education, like you mentioned, to get a little more understanding. But I think what has been incredibly interesting also has been that the approach that you're taking by starting out as giving examples and then coming back to the theory. So thank you, thanks a lot, and it's been really um, fun also in a way. And I hope everybody who's listening to our podcast has something that they can think about, some new ideas that they want to implement. And I am looking forward to seeing you in India sometime soon and meeting
Okay,
you in person.
of course, reach out on LinkedIn if you anybody here wants to visit a project or wants more information about how to educate their teams on lean. But we have the examples and the data. And so eh, we just show you exactly what we see. We don't need to make anything up because we
Sure.
actually have the artifacts and people can interpret it differently, but we start that as a basis so that there is a point for us to discuss and make meaningful conversations.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
thanks again. And I think, okay.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go, but have a great day.
Yeah, you too. You too. Thank you. Thanks a lot.